Well, Britain's terror threat is at its highest level since 9/11, with extremists using the war in Gaza as a springboard to recruit new members.
Now, MPs have reportedly been advised that intercepted terrorist chatter has increased, whatever that means.
Well, we're joined now by former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chapman.
How happy are you for him to be your... She's so excited. She's back today and all she wanted was Chapman.
I'm a very big fan of yours, Major General Chapman. But getting back to the story now, is this something we should be concerned about?
We should always be concerned about it, but it's kind of been a rolling headline since August 21. It was the same headline in August 21 when we withdrew from Afghanistan because of then deemed to be the threat from the Taliban and ISK, Islamic State Khorasan. If that were objectively true, the threat level would have been raised. At the moment, the threat level in the UK is substantial. That's level 3 of 5. It's not been raised since 2022. So that's an indicator that it's not as bad from the perspective of JTAC, the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, as some people think. But there is a warning, because last week the Global Terrorism Index actually gave the figures for terrorism in the West, that's including Europe and the US, which was at the lowest level for 15 years, the lowest number of fatalities for 15 years. But lethality and casualties was only one metric. The warning was that the war in Gaza could propel that to bigger figures in 2024. What we're seeing at the moment is more hate crime. We're seeing more extremism in terms of online referrals, more referrals to the Prevent programme. What we're not seeing is that translated into terrorism, because for terrorism, you need both a grievance and an ideology. We know that people have a grievance. They don't necessarily have the ideology. What is different here is we often have flare-ups in the Israeli-Gaza arena, but those are normally time-limited. The 3 previous campaigns from 08, 09 onwards in Israel lasted 11, 18 and 19 days. We're now at sort of day 150, and that spillage can be seen potentially in terrorism in the future in 2024. But the arithmetic of terrorism at the moment would tell you it's still a very low event in the UK. So I wouldn't get, people having the sort of dread hazard that we talk about and think that everyone's going to be blown up, because it would be very difficult if I was to ask you when was the last terrorism attack in the UK. Most people would go back to an event in 17 or 18 because they're very, very rare.
Chip, great to have you on. I'm interested in what you said about Israel and Gaza because, of course, terrorism, when we think of the great terror attacks of the world, you talked about ideology. There is definitely always ideology/religion behind any war and any conflict. What the Israel-Hamas war has done, and we forget, let's talk the humanitarian situation everybody agrees with. But if you find yourself talking to people, I was talking to some people this weekend, speaking to some Jewish people, speaking to people who actually have great sympathy with what's happening in Gaza. That doesn't mean they're supporters of Hamas. Why is that? Why is that going to lead to terrorism? Because my Jewish friends say they're being abused in the streets and their kids can't get on a bus and wear a school blazer without being given dirty looks. And I'm sure other people on other sides are saying the same thing. So why would that lead to terrorism and a higher threat? Where does that come from, do you think?
Well, partly you could see it in the initial protests on the streets. So at the more radical end, you had Hezbollah Tahrir on the streets proselytising. We know that they've now been prescribed. So what you see in most of the terror attacks, which are the Islamist terror attacks in the UK, is almost a linear progression from the philosophy of Muslim Brotherhood, which Hamas are, through to historically al-Mujahirun, Chowdhury, and then on to people who, for example, took part in the Westminster attacks and the attacks in 17 to 19. So if you look at Karam Butt, Usman Khan, they're all people who kind of progressed through the ranks of being initially a Muslim Brotherhood proponent through one of those Islamist organizations. So it's the fact that you've got this endurance which gives the grievance, but you still need this proselytization to have the ideology if you're going to have a terrorist attack. Now, a lot of people say, we could have lots of big attacks. That is very, very unlikely because there would be spillage and leakage of any plots. The number of plots is not going up very rapidly at the moment at all. The real fear is that you have the lone actor, or what is now called the self-initiated terrorist, that is more likely than a complex plot using bombs and shooters. And it's really that low end with bladed weapons or vehicle as a weapon attack, which is the main threat.
And of course, I think it's really important whenever we discuss terror threats like this that we make that distinction between Islam, which is a very peaceful religion, and extremists, people who have been radicalised online. How important is it that we invest more in programmes such as the Prevent programme, which Rishi Sunak spoke about at the weekend, and yet it is not receiving as much funding as it was when it was initiated?
Yeah, you can't arrest your way or kill your way or lock people up out of your way of the problem. It is best to get in early, to intervene before people take a course from having an extreme position going into sort of terrorism. But again, that is not often very linear. One of the worries in that is the age of people who've been referred to the Prevent programme. And you often have what we now call the sort of salad bar philosophy, where people are picking various grievances to propel them. That might be, for example, there's more chatter about mass school shootings, for example, about disaffected youngsters. So the salad bar philosophy, or mixed, unclear ideologies, is one of those things that we particularly worry about for real youngsters who haven't really formulated all their views, but are pretty malleable in terms of their worldview from what happens in world events.
Absolutely fascinating.
Fascinating, Chip. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Major General Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD.